আসসালামু আলাইকুম, সবাইকে আমন্ত্রণ জানাচ্ছি চাইল্ড ফাউন্ডেশন চাইল্ড ই কেয়ারে আজকের এপিসোডে। আজকে আমাদের 29th এপিসোড, 29তম এপিসোড, এবং আজকে আমরা খুবই একজন বিশিষ্ট অতিথিকে নিয়ে এসেছি আপনাদের সামনে, এবং আমি প্রথমেই তার কথায় চলে যাচ্ছি। উনি হচ্ছেন ভ্যালেরি এ টেইলর, ফাউন্ডার অ্যান্ড কোঅর্ডিনেটর সেন্টার ফর দ্য রিহ্যাবিলিটেশন অফ প্যারালাইজড, সিআরপি। এবং আমরা আজকে তার কাছ থেকে যে টপিক নিয়ে আমরা তার সঙ্গে আজকে কথা বলবো সেটা হচ্ছে আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং স্পেশাল নিড কমিউনিটি ইন বাংলাদেশ এন্ড টিপস এন্ড সাজেশনস অন সেরেব্রাল পালসি। আসলে আমরা তার এই বাংলাদেশে আসার যে জার্নিটা এবং তার মাধ্যমে কিভাবে বাংলাদেশের স্পেশাল নিড কমিউনিটিতে তার বিশেষ একটি অবদান রয়েছে গত 41 বছর ধরে, সেটার গল্পটা শুনবো, এবং তার পাশাপাশি আপনাদের কিছু সেরিব্রাল পালসির যে প্রশ্ন আপনারা পাঠিয়েছেন আমাদেরকে সেগুলো নিয়ে আলাপ আলোচনা করব। এবং তার যে কন্ট্রিবিউশন বাংলাদেশের স্পেশাল নিড কমিউনিটির জন্য, তার কিন্তু ভাষায় প্রকাশ করা যাবে না যে আমরা কত লাকি যে তার মতো একজন মানুষকে আমরা বাংলাদেশে প্রেক্ষাপটে পেয়েছি। আর দেরি না করে তাকে আমরা সামনে নিয়ে আসছি এবং তার সাথে আমরা আজকে আমাদের এই টপিক নিয়ে কথা বলবো। আমাদের সামনে আসছে ভ্যালেরি এ টেইলর, founder and coordinator Center for the Rehabilitation of Paralyzed, CRP। এবং বাংলাদেশের সিআরপি নাম শুনলে স্পেশাল নিড কমিউনিটিতে সিআরপির যে অবদান রয়েছে তা আসলেই ভাষায় প্রকাশ করা যাবে না। I just introduced you, our honorable guest today. Thank you so much for joining us with Child Foundation. As I was talking to you before, I feel very honored on behalf of Child Foundation, because our journey many years back at our inauguration started with your honorable presence as the chief guest for our inauguration. And our birthday is coming up, and to have you so close to our birthday of Child Foundation, it's an honor. Thank you so much for making the time for us. How are you?
Fine, thank you. I just would like to say thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be able to come. Thank you.
The honor is all ours. We are so lucky. Not only Child Foundation, the entire country is so lucky to have you with us. And I was just in the introduction telling our audience a little bit about your contribution to the special needs community in Bangladesh, which is remarkable. We would love to hear that story from you. So in the beginning, if we could a little bit talk about the special needs community in Bangladesh in general, and how you became part of it. And you were just telling me it's been 41 years of CRP. So if you could tell us a little bit about your journey from the beginning, how it started from where you signed up for 15 months and now it's been 41 years.
It's actually 51 years. We
51,
were.
I'm sorry.
The age of our center, our project is 41, but we were 10 years in the making. So it makes me feel even older than I
and
might.
prouder. This is an amazing achievement. So how did it all start? If you could share with us.
Yeah, surely. Please feel free to blow the whistle when I talk too much. I'm known for talking too much. I was training in London as a physiotherapist, and towards the end of the training, our teachers were asking all of us in the class what were we planning to do as our first job. And I thought very much I wanted to be a volunteer. And having read 3 different books about medical work in South India, in fact in Vellore, the Christian Medical College Hospital there, I said I would like to go to that part of the world. And for me, I thought, oh no, I don't believe it. I thought I could come immediately, but the organization, Voluntary Service Overseas, said, no way can you go. You must do 2 years after qualifying to get some basic experience. So as soon as my 2 years were up, in the UK, working in a rehabilitation centre and in a general hospital, I applied to them officially. And it was just happened that at that time, a small hospital in the Chittagong Hill Tracts in Chandragona, they had applied to voluntary service overseas. For short, it's known as VSO. They had applied for a physiotherapist. And I was told at that time that there was a choice. I could go sign on for 15 months or I could sign on for 2 years. And I remember thinking to myself, but I may not like East Pakistan. And why would I say 2 years? I will say I'll be very wise. I'll be very careful. I'll sign on for just 15 months. And
Yeah.
so 51 years later, you feel really very silly when you realize that you were not, that planning was not my strong point. But I think over all those years, we were somehow uh, drawn along, pulled along by the next plan and then the next plan and the next plan. And it so happened in Chandragona that I came across 4 spinally injured people.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking, why did we allow them to be taken into hospital? Because there's nothing for them after hospital. I was so afraid they would just go home and die because
Mhm.
they would be beggars. But um, they had had no chance of occupational therapy, of vocational training. There were no wheelchairs for people.
Mhm.
So that was my first taste of the world for those with a spinal injury, either having broken their necks or broken their backs, and really having a lifetime invariably of using a wheelchair. So I extended my stay for 3 years at Chandragona, and then I went back to the UK to do some fundraising because I felt very strongly that there was a real need for rehabilitation for spinally injured
Mhm.
sufferers across the country. And so I applied to 10 different organizations, and one of those organizations said to me, don't duplicate. Go back to Dhaka and go to the Shahid Shurawadi Hospital, because there you will find in the hospital that there is a small project that started, which is vocational retraining and job replacement for spinally injured patients. So I did that. I
Mhm.
have, having loved living in Chandragona for those first 3 years, when I came back, I joined the Shahid Shurawadi Hospital and found indeed this was the project that was going on. But in fact, what one found was so many young men dying in their beds in the acute stage, because of, I have to say, a real terrible negligence. They weren't
Mhm.
being turned, they were
Mhm.
succumbing to horrific pressure sores. And so I felt all the more that if we could have a rehabilitation centre, but having people as early as possible after their spinal injury, that we could try and prevent the pressure sores occurring at all. And so we were a bit like gypsies. We spent the first 11 years moving from one location to another.
Mhm.
After a couple of years, we moved to Danmandi and used a rented house there for 4.5 years. Then the landlord said he wanted to pull the building down and build a big medical centre. So we were on the road again, looking for a bigger property, which we found at Farmgate.
Mhm.
And we were there for another 4.5 years. So altogether,
Wow.
after 11 years, we were told that there was a 5-acre plot of ground that we could purchase in Sava.
Mhm.
And So
So
we
you
were
have been there ever since. So that's the 41 years in Sapa, right?
well, yes, that's right. And now we have 12 small sub-centres across the country. The aim was originally to try to go to each of the different divisions so that people who could benefit from the physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech and language therapy could receive it close to home.
And even a lot of things, for example, all the therapies that we talk about, speech, OT, PT, in general, it's very Dhaka centric. Like it's very city oriented or the major cities. So what you have done really touched the heart of the country where you are working really in rural areas where it's not accessible and it's much needed. Thank you so much. I'm in awe of all that you have achieved and really admire what you have done. So if I could just a little bit in the beginning before I go into specific questions, if I could hear a few tips and suggestions for those parents who have special needs or specifically cerebral palsy. Do you have any general tips and suggestions to just begin with, and then we'll go into their specific topics?
Yes, I think very often parents, the baby is delivered and looks perfect, and so they don't realize, and it's not obvious unless perhaps if you have a trained eye, then perhaps you would pick it up more quickly. But often spasm is in the muscles is preventing the baby from lifting their head or turning on one side or the other. And so often the mother, perhaps after the first few months, sees another baby of the same age, and they realize that actually the other baby is able to do more physically than their own child. And then they perhaps come forward and say to a medical professional, what can I do to help the baby? Why is it that it's not able now to sit when other children are able to do so? There is awareness that is needed, certainly.
What age could be the earliest age that it could be diagnosed for cerebral palsy children? Would you?
I think really just after a few months. You see, like many things, you can have it really at a very minimal level of that you could say somebody with cerebral palsy, but you can also have somebody with really an extreme number of symptoms, speech that is perhaps not intelligible, not able to walk often, and depending on their situation, sometimes it causes contractures, tightening of the knees and the hips, particularly joints that are then causing the problem of walking to be even more difficult.
Would you say in Bangladesh the diagnosis part is happening? How would you say in terms of the perspective in Bangladesh? Do you think cerebral palsy is timely in a timely fashion being diagnosed for children, or do you see a delay in how they are diagnosed usually?
I think there could be, when you think across the country, with so many children affected, I think it could be that it is sadly not picked up in time, and like everything, then it's harder work for the child and the family to try and combat the difficulties
But it
that
is
the
very
child
common in
faces.
Bangladesh, correct? Cerebral palsy
Well,
is one
I
of
think around the world, I often would wonder about the midwifery standards, but as I say, it can happen around the world. Uh, So
Much awareness is needed in terms of
cer-
parents. So definitely.
certainly, there's a real need for yes, certainly.
যেটা ভ্যালেরি চাইল্ডের বলছে আমি একটু যদি সামারাইজ করি যে আর্লি ডিটেকশনটা খুবই জরুরি এবং আর্লি ডায়াগনোসিস অবশ্যই প্যারেন্টসদের জন্য খুবই জরুরি, যেখানে যত তাড়াতাড়ি আমরা এটা বুঝে নিতে পারবো যে কি বাচ্চার সেরিব্রাল পলসি আছে, আর্লি ইন্টারভেনশন শুরু হতে পারে এবং প্যারেন্টসদের জন্য ওই বাচ্চার সাথে কাজ করা আরো সহজ হয়ে যেতে পারে। So I'm going to go to questions. We had a lot of questions coming from parents who wanted to get your response. The first one that I have, I'll read it in Bengali first and then we'll talk about it. বাচ্চার বয়স ৮ বছর, ডায়াগনোসিস সিপি, এবং সে লিখেছে যে বাংলাদেশের প্রেক্ষাপটে বিশেষ করে গ্রামাঞ্চলের দিকে সিপি বাচ্চা বেশি হওয়ার কারণ কি? So basically she's asking why is it that in the rural part of the country you see a lot of cerebral palsy happening, which you just touched base a little bit. But is there any thing that you want to add to that? That why is it happening in the villages a lot more than in the cities?
Yes, I just wonder if access to hospitals and some of the special schools are become better known in cities, and in a village, I think perhaps to families feel a little shy that their child is not able to sit or walk, or perhaps the school is reluctant to take them in, and so they seem to have everything going against them. And whereas if they had been in a city, particularly in and around Dhaka, the situation could have been very different.
But are the numbers higher in villages of cerebral palsy? Of just the occurrence of it?
Yes, I don't really feel very qualified, unfortunately, to answer that, but you just feel it's perhaps the way it's dealt with, that
Okay.
because help is not at
There.
hand, that the children are sort of, because they can't sit, then what can they do? They lie on their backs looking at the ceiling all the time. They can't, they're not able, they're not even having access to special chairs which enable them to sit up and view their family and their friends eye to eye, but they're left, and so they're sort of going rather in a backward direction rather
Right.
than progressing.
So lack of support causes the severity to be even more
Well,
than.
I think it becomes then more pronounced, because
Right.
if they had good physiotherapy, occupational therapy from very early on, the same with the speech therapy,
Right.
if that could start earlier, then the difficulties are minimized. Yes.
সেকেন্ড প্রশ্নতে চলে যাচ্ছি। তার করেছে যে সিপি বাচ্চারা যদি ভিডিও গেমের প্রতি এডিক্টেড হয়ে থাকে তাহলে তাদের ব্রেইনে কি কোনো প্রভাব পড়ে কিনা? So her question is about video games and um, gadgets. Like if there's a cerebral palsy child who's addicted to playing too many video games, does it affect their cognitive development? Because a lot of the times, even I guess this question is related to all children with disability. Like we have the fear that if they're addicted to gadgets, like the effect they have, and with CP children with so much restriction on them playing and having movement, they tend to be attracted to gadgets and devices perhaps more. What would you say about that?
Yeah, well, I live with, now she's a young woman. I have two girls who were abandoned by their families, one with a straightforward cerebral palsy, another with something diagnosed as secondary dystonia. But realizing that the younger one is addicted to Bollywood,
Most of us
Uh,
are.
yeah, and I often think, that I really should try and appreciate from her point of view that, especially if you have a series of films on television, that they become part of life and play a really big role. Um, and of course, what is difficult is if you've got, for example, something like dyslexia, which means you don't have the pleasure of reading a book yourself. You have to
Mhm,
wait for somebody to read for you, or a talking book. So if if we didn't have a television, I think it means that they're great company. But I can also see the downside of too
mhm,
many gadgets and too many things that the click of a button, all sorts of things work. Um, but if one doesn't have a certain amount of time given to that, then uh, what I feel sad about is when people are sort of just in a wheelchair staring into space, and
mhm.
there's no one
Yeah,
there to communicate with or to stimulate
right.
the child or
So
to
there needs
keep
to be a
things.
balance, I guess, like,
You're right.
uh,
It's all about getting the right balance, isn't
balance.
it? Yeah.
It's a struggle because my son who has autism, uh, they they enjoy these kind of things, or he's into
Sure.
Bollywood as well.
Sure.
And it's like they enjoy it, but then again, I also see the downside of it where it's affecting him because he's not socializing with others. So
Yes.
another
Yes.
thing that I would recommend parents is that try to make it interactive even with the gadgets, where you try to say, oh, do you like this? Oh, what do you like about this? Oh, let me sit with you and enjoy what you're enjoying. So maybe there could be a chance of some interaction,
Yeah.
just
Mhm.
not them staring into a gadget itself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think it's a problem that all special needs parents now are facing, because there's no school for some of our children
No,
because of the
that's right.
pandemic. It's been, yeah, it's been
A very,
hard,
very, very difficult
difficult.
year, hasn't it, for children and for their parents? Yeah.
Yes, and the routine. So I'm going to go to the next question. বাচ্চার বয়স 10 মাস এবং সিপি ডায়াগনোসিস সাসপেক্টেড। বাচ্চা জন্মের পর কোন লক্ষণ দেখলে বুঝবো বা আইডেন্টিফাই করতে পারবো যে বাচ্চার সিপি বৈশিষ্ট্য সম্পন্ন? So the child is 10 months old and they're suspecting it's cerebral palsy. So she wants to know the red flags. What are the early signs and symptoms that uh, parents can actually notice right away
Yes,
at
yes.
10 months?
And I think head control, neck control, uh, uh, ability to be able to turn on your side is something that babies without cerebral palsy would be able to do, to then be able to push up onto all fours and start
Mhm.
crawling. Uh, those, I think, are the sort of telltale ways of detecting
Does are there
for
other
parents.
diagnoses that kind of presents itself similarly, like where it can become a bit confusing whether it's cerebral palsy or
Or
just
something else.
something else?
Yes. Um, no, I'm not too sure.
Because I feel like parents, some of the times they just think, oh, it's just a delay. Maybe we don't really have to do. But at this point, her second part of the question is like, what are the treatments for cerebral palsy? So at that point, what are the first steps that any parent should take once they have noticed that my child is 10 months old, is not rolling, and doesn't have good head control? What should be their first steps that they should take?
Well, I think if they can have the benefit of a physiotherapist and an occupational therapist, the idea basically is to put the child through those milestones that they've perhaps missed out on. So the head control, the crawling, then eventually being able to sit, and then to be able to kneel up, and then hopefully to stand and walk. It's to bring in those milestones, so that, because without those steps along the way, something else it doesn't develop as it should. So
and the importance of early intervention, I guess, comes in.
yes, certainly.
The 10-month-old, and as you said, with proper physical therapy and occupational therapy, the child could go much farther if the weight
Certainly. What we have is a 2-week program for mothers to stay with their children, and they will get physiotherapy, occupational therapy, and if there's any difficulty with speech, as there often is, speech and language therapy. We also have, this is, I know, perhaps rather unusual, but it's very, very valuable. We have a little pony. We've had one for years. He died of old age. We have another one now. And what it means is that balance is greatly improved, head control, trunk balance. And the other thing for children with cerebral palsy is that they tend to have something called adductor spasm. So the knees are often almost rubbing against each other. It forces them to come up onto their toes, and they have this sort of rolling gait. And if you sit that child astride a pony, it gradually relaxes these very tight muscles that pull the knees in together. And I have watched it with my younger adopted daughter in England, how you just watch her body relax as the horse was sort of just into a rhythm, and the body, as I say, can relax beautifully and benefit with what I like to describe as riding therapy.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
We are very lucky. In England, we find many families have ponies for their able children, and they will often loan those creatures. But of course, what is also so good for a child from their wheelchair, and Poppy, my younger daughter, would do it with her foot because she couldn't do it with her hands, is to brush the pony. Well, the pony can stand all day long. He loves it to be brushed. But for a child from their wheelchair to brush the side of the pony, I think is a beautiful way to relate to an animal.
No, that's wonderful. So the new pony is residing in CRP.
Yeah, he's just over the wall here. He's so if ever families are nearby to Sava, you know, he knows his job is to be on the go, helping children.
That's
so
wonderful.
He's the one four-legged staff member that we have.
That's wonderful. I've heard of therapy dogs and the use of animals in terms of calming.
Sure.
But I've never heard of that. That's really interesting. So I would like to ask, the 2-week program that you just mentioned, that sounds something that our viewers might find it very useful. So this is along with the mother, and what's the purpose of this training? Like, what does it?
The mother needs to be there to be trained. And the purpose is because so many will go back to a village or a very rural setting, maybe never see a a qualified therapist
Yes.
for years at a time. And so the mother, if she can pick up as much as she can practically, but we also give every mother this book, and it's called Towards an Inclusive World. And it's something that I personally feel it's got lots and lots of cartoon pictures in it, and this is all in Bangla,
That's
but I
great.
think it addresses just about every part of life.
Mhm.
Of diet, of sleep, of exercise, of so many things. And I think uh, this is something that's really very valuable.
Mhm.
If you have gone with your uh, child for the practical
Mhm.
ways of learning in a group. You see, mothers often are perhaps their child is the only one they've met that hasn't developed at
Mhm.
normal speed. But suddenly here they are sharing, well, 40 mothers with their children are with us together. And then they realize, oh, the mothers have come from all over the
Mhm.
country, and they're not so unusual at all. They find great strength in uh,
Mhm.
talking and working alongside other mothers. We like to send them on a little outing to the National Monument, for example, because they're
For a bonding.
yes, and strangers will come up and ask them, why can't your daughter walk, and why so many wheelchairs, and it's so good for mothers to learn to proudly say,
Yeah.
oh, but in this last I've been back now again and to CRP, and now this time my child is able to walk, and so um, it's so good to be exposed to the real world.
Definitely. যিনি প্রশ্ন করেছেন আশা করি পেয়েছেন। There's a comment for you from an audience. Thank you, ma'am, for making this country your second home. This country is truly blessed to get a pure heart like you. Thank you. Means a lot. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year ahead.
Oh,
Definitely very, very sweet comment, and definitely we are lucky that you are with us. যিনি প্রশ্ন করেছেন, আমরা শুনলাম যে কিভাবে আপনি বেশ কিছু ট্রেনিং বা ওয়ার্কশপের মাধ্যমে অনেক কিছু জানতে পারবেন যে সেরিব্রাল পলসি যে বাচ্চারা আছে তাকে কিভাবে আপনি বাসায় সেই বাচ্চার সাথে কিভাবে কাজ করতে পারবেন। ভ্যালেরি যে 2 উইক প্রোগ্রামের কথা বললো, এটা খুবই ভালো হবে, স্পেশালি যেহেতু আপনার বাচ্চা ছোট আছে। তো আপনার যদি আরো ইনফরমেশন প্রয়োজন হয়ে থাকে আমাদের সাথে যোগাযোগ করতে পারেন। আমরা আরো ইনফরমেশন আপনার জন্য এই বিষয়টাতে প্রোভাইড করব। নেক্সট কোয়েশ্চেন ইজ দ্য চাইল্ড এজ ইজ 4, ডায়াগনোসিস সিপি। সিপি বাচ্চাদের ক্ষেত্রে কোন বয়স পর্যন্ত থেরাপি চালানো প্রয়োজন? সো হাউ লং does a CP child need all of these therapies? So, and
yeah, thank
the
you.
parent is 4 years old, child's parent, so she's wondering like how long it will continue for that child.
And I think that's where the mother becoming quite knowledgeable and quite practiced can then she would be able to come back for follow-up appointments and advice on how to proceed at each different stage. Again, I guess everyone is a little bit different because depending on how severe
Mhm.
the spasm is, or
Right.
the symptoms, or how slight, will depend on the length of the number
Right.
of years that you would need more intensive treatment or not. But I do think people would be wise to get the help of physiotherapy, occupational therapy, because occupational therapy is something that would help the mother to know how the child could dress themselves, how to hold a pen if it's too difficult to grasp, how do you have a bigger grip made on the pen so that you can support that. Um, how do you manage to feed yourself? So many things that come under occupational therapy.
Right.
How do you manage the bathroom, and the different chairs that we make for children with cerebral palsy, especially. Are things that they could learn a great deal, because we often suggest that a child has two chairs, one that they can propel on wheels, but another that they can relax in. And
Mm-hmm.
this is something made of scrap paper and cardboard and plastic bottles, and so it's recycled, so it's cheap, but it's often put at a sort of reclining position, so that the child can have a complete change from sitting for
Mm-hmm.
hours on one chair in one position, but they can sort of lie back a little bit in the
Mm-hmm.
second very cheap chair, which often the mothers can make themselves. Again, this is something that they will see being made by some of our people with disabilities, but
Mm-hmm.
employed by our centre
Yes,
to make these chairs.
that is so many initiatives that you have taken over the years that's benefiting the special needs individuals and their families. It's remarkable, like the whole wheelchair and making and employing special needs individuals to actually take part in becoming more independent. It's amazing just to know how much you have contributed. Now, I just am remembering a conversation I had with a mother who had a cerebral palsy child, and I noticed that she didn't have any wheelchair or didn't have anything like. It was one of our parent workshop that she was brought, and I asked, like, do you have something at home like a wheelchair or and then she just responded, no, she just likes to lie down and stay laying down. And it was heartbroken really. And then I asked her, like, do you think what does she do at home? It's like, oh, she just watches TV or lays in the bed all day. And I asked her, like, do you think that how would you feel if you were doing that? Would you enjoy it? And then for a second she said, but she enjoys it. I'm like, would you enjoy it? And then she was just like,
Wow.
not really. So there's so much awareness that needs to be done, because there are like parents or families who are just like, okay, this child doesn't need any equipment, doesn't need anything else. They're just content the way they are. It's
Yes.
it's remarkable how many people you have helped just by doing what you're doing. And
But if I could just mention that children can be, although bodies are not enabling them
hmm
to do what you would like to do with your arms or your legs, but that doesn't mean necessarily that there are the children can be extremely intelligent, very bright indeed, and
exactly,
we've had people who've ended up by going to university, and it's just a
exactly.
sheer drive by the owner of that body that doesn't
hmm
do as you want it to do, that's enabled them to go. Because sometimes mothers and families feel that schools are not very welcoming. And I think, and we have trained different groups of teachers from local schools so that they don't feel awkward in how do you talk to somebody in a wheelchair, um, and it's so bad to talk down to somebody, of course, with a
hmm
disability, isn't it? But unless you share with the parents how
hmm
best to treat somebody, or the school teachers, they won't know, and it's
Exactly.
made easy when they are
hmm
informed. So
Definitely.
we should never give up on how far the children can progress
Can do.
given the chance.
Definitely. And that leads me to the next question, where the question came is um, in Bengalian, saying at first, cerebral palsy কারণে মানসিক প্রতিবন্ধক কেন সৃষ্টি হয়? Um, why is it that due to cerebral palsy, mental disability develops, or could they be? So it seems like she's asking whether cerebral palsy causes mental or cognitive disability as well or not, which you kind of started talking a little bit about. Like, as you said, they could go to universities. It's not necessarily that somebody with cerebral palsy would have significant deficiency in cognitive or intellectually. Would you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Yes, I mean, as far as I know, they are two different, very different things.
Right.
And I think it's perhaps because generally teachers and perhaps parents also tend to have low uh, goals for
Expectations.
their children. And I think we should think big and keep in mind those people that have seemingly started off with such difficulty with a body that, as I say, doesn't do what they would like it. But I can remember many years ago, uh, and the film and the book were called My Left Foot. He did everything by holding the pen in his in the toes of his left foot, but he ended up being a very talented painter and
Mm-hmm.
an author of books. So, and this was many years ago when people all said, "Oh no,
You
he
cannot.
won't be able to manage at school." And so our hopes for children often are really very small, and if we can give examples to parents of just
Mm-hmm.
how far a child can go, if we all encourage them,
Mm-hmm.
it,
I feel that's true about not only cerebral palsy children, but in general, children with disability that are nonverbal. That we start thinking that, okay, because he or she is nonverbal or non-mobile, like they're cognitively are not experiencing or um, almost like feeling the same emotions. So, like, I feel like I think it's an area where awareness is needed, that they're just as human as we are. They have same emotions and they have potential. I think that's where um, a lot of these, I would say, awareness work is needed. That they have
yes,
tremendous potential.
yes, and nobody can measure it, can we? But the more we can open up the doors of the different areas that could interest children and how they can excel, it is a two-way thing, isn't it? It's the surroundings and the possibilities that are presented to the child and the encouragement they need to come forward and grasp the opportunity.
Just out of curiosity, from your all these years, CRP, as you had mentioned, like has employed a lot of individuals with disability. How many do we have a number of how many people actually have been employed by your projects that you have worked for so many
Over,
years?
yeah, overall, I don't know, but I think we're about 46 staff members now. I'm
Beautiful.
just having
No,
a very
that's okay.
uh,
That's
uh,
an idea is fine, but that's remarkable because without these opportunities, these individuals would not be able to do anything. And the fact that that opportunity was given to them, it needs to happen everywhere.
it's true. And I do remember this, that one of the wheelchair users who had been to university, who'd got her certificates, she said to me how many interviews she had been to get a job. And she said, and I felt so sad when she mentioned it, she said that when you're called in for the interview, and the minute people see that you're in a wheelchair, she said, I knew there's no opportunity for me at all, just because there is somebody in a wheelchair. We are preventing any chances
Mhm.
of getting a job. So this is really sad, and it's it's a great disappointment to think that the general public are not able to think in a bigger and broader way about giving that person the chance. If they can have their certificates from university, but not put that to
Work.
use, that's really very sad, I feel.
Yeah. And as we have discussed in other episodes, the law actually provides them of that
Yes,
right. So it's, in Bangladesh, actually the law is,
the quota system. Yes,
yeah.
yes,
So there is the protection, but it's not executed.
exactly.
And to that point too, like how many buildings have we seen that has a ramp? So yes, you
Absolutely.
have that certificate, but how would I get to work if that building doesn't have access to,
Absolutely, absolutely. And something that as you are constructing a new building, it is so easy to put a ramp in because it could be nothing to do with disability. It could be just a
Correct.
little baby in a
Stroller,
pushchair,
yeah.
or an elderly
Right.
relative who has been active all their lives but now is finding that they need the help of a wheelchair, that needs the ramp for access to buildings. Yes, so the laws of construction can sit in black and white, but
Mhm.
if it's not followed, sadly,
Right. It's just a piece of paper. Then if the mindset of the population doesn't change, it doesn't really um, play out as the law suggests. So I think there's a lot of awareness that needs to happen. I will continue. I do have more questions, and these questions are coming from teachers. The first question is, what is the importance of early diagnosis in cerebral palsy? I think which we talked about a little bit, that early intervention. So I'm going to move on to the next. What is the importance of physical activity in long-term goal for those with cerebral palsy? So physical activity for those with cerebral palsy.
I'm sorry,
Oh, I'm
there's
sorry.
quite a bit of reverberation.
Okay,
I
I'll
didn't catch what you were saying. I'm so
I'll, I'll,
sorry.
I'll repeat it. What is the importance of physical activity in long-term goal for someone with cerebral palsy? So the importance of physical activity.
Yes, yes. I think it's of utmost importance. And again, working with a physiotherapist, they would be able to highlight, without seeing the child, of course, it's always very difficult, but they would be able to say, oh, look, the wrists are tending to become contracted. You need to do the opposite action to strengthen those up so that the hands remain really useful. Whatever it is, the therapist could pick out which sorts of exercises, how many you need to do. They would be very helpful on that, I think.
Right.
The
And
same with, sorry.
no, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just thinking whether it's arms or legs, the physical exercise is
The
very,
key.
very important. Yeah.
All right. So the teacher's question also asked, like, what are the therapy methods that are important for improvement in those with cerebral palsy? So there's physical therapy that you talked about, and you also talked about a little bit of OT.
Yeah.
Are there any other therapies?
What I think children love, mothers as well, is what we would refer to as group therapy. So they are all often singing to do particular actions, so that the feeling of we're all in this together, and mothers are, I think, taking great courage from the seeing their child improving over the time that they're with us. again, it's the therapist who would pick out what they feel is going to be the most beneficial way of
So it differs from children to children, obviously.
very much so. It really does, because it's something that can be quite widespread, isn't it? You know, when you think of head control, trunk control, and then the movement of arms and legs. There's so much variation from one to another, really. Yes.
So the next question is বাংলাদেশের প্রেক্ষাপটে বিশেষ চাহিদা সম্পন্ন বাচ্চাদের থেরাপির ব্যাপারে বাবা মার উদাসীন থাকে থেরাপি দেওয়ার ব্যাপারে তাদের কিভাবে সচেতনতা বৃদ্ধি করতে পারে It's a very good question actually. So there's in terms of special needs children in Bangladesh, whenever parents hear about therapy, they kind of become very depressed about it and very much against it almost. And the fact that giving therapy is beneficial, how do we create this awareness that this therapy is actually beneficial? And I guess she's talking about the taboo that many of us, whenever we hear therapy, or it's, I think, anything related to mental health, or that you need to go to a specialist for therapies or psychological issues, you need therapies. I think culturally we just kind of take a step back. So how do we create this awareness, especially for cerebral palsy children, when like how do you create that awareness that therapy is so important for these children?
Yes, that's interesting, because I have to admit that I wasn't really sort of aware. I mean, I know with mental health challenges that along with it can go a sort of negative feeling about it. But from the point of view of physiotherapy and occupational therapy and speech therapy, I haven't sort of taken on board that can also be something that people are inwardly resisting, that they don't
but
like.
Then again, have you faced those parents who are saying, oh, my child has cerebral therapy, she or he might never walk, or this might not do anything. So if I have the money, why not spend that money on my neurotypical child without any issues, instead of spending all this money for therapy? Because that is sometimes often, like when you were saying, like the potential, like they don't really see the potential. So why should I be spending so much energy taking them all the way to CRP, getting that therapy? Why put that emphasis? Like I have had parents who say, but what will it do to her? She will just not be walking. So what do you say to those parents, like to have some hope and to believe in the therapy that they actually work?
Yeah, I think the one person that might be the most help in especially with a group of 40 mothers is the mother who can say, oh, I was here for 2 weeks, and in that time my child was able to feed themselves for the first time or take their first steps. And it's so encouraging, not only for the cerebral palsy child themselves, of course, but for the family and for the therapists. And I think mostly you will get somebody amongst that number who will be very positive, who could be the one person that hearing how much they appreciate the improvement could really motivate. Otherwise, it's so easy to think, oh no, these people are being paid to say these wonderful things. But when it's a mother with their own child that they've witnessed how much improvement there's been, because nothing just happens overnight, just with the click of a finger. It doesn't happen that way. But when there's a lot of hard work and real interest to improve the child's chances, then I think so often people are rewarded with good results.
But so the teacher who's asking, I guess my guess is, because it's from a teacher's point of view, they probably suggest a lot that get this therapy and that therapy, and the parents are reluctant. So I see that happening a lot with not with children with cerebral palsy, but children with autism and other neurological disorder who might benefit greatly. But as soon as parents hear therapy, they kind of take a step back. So I hope that we can create this awareness. We are very close to the end of our conversation with you today, but I just want to personally ask you one or two last questions. I want to just hear from you. What do you think your biggest achievement has been in Bangladesh in these 51 years that you have spent, and what you're most proud of that you have achieved in the special needs community? I think I would love to hear that answer coming straight from you. I'm sure there have been so many achievements, but what are you most happy and what brings a smile on your face?
Well, I suppose, again, it was all unplanned, but the actual training of those therapists, it all began with people who were assistant level. So they would have a CRP certificate. But over the first 1 or 2 years, those assistants would say to us, but there is such a thing as a diploma in physiotherapy. We want that. So we went to the state medical faculty and were able to start a diploma course. And as the years went by, so those diploma level people said, but we want a degree. There's Dhaka University. And so we went to Dhaka University and were able to start the degree course in physiotherapy, in occupational therapy, and more recently in speech and language therapy, and even more recently now in prosthetics and orthotics. So this is, of course, the artificial limbs and the aids and appliances for children and adults. So I think that has been something that has pleased me so much, because now, of course, there is a master's degree that is recognized by that CRP has, and a master's degree in rehabilitation science. And the beauty of that is that half the students are Bangladeshi and the other half come from SAARC countries. So it's Bhutan and Nepal and India and Sri Lanka. And so studying together, I think, is a wonderful chance for people in this area. I think something that pleased me so much that came out of a WHO very recently, a research they did into the numbers of people in the world requiring rehabilitation. They said that for so many years it was always considered as something a bit superfluous, a bit unnecessary. But they say that now they realize this enormous number of people who will benefit from rehabilitation. And rehabilitation is done through the hands of the physiotherapists, the occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, prosthetists and orthotists. So,
which you had the vision for many years back. We're just, now the world is catching up to your revolutionary vision and the importance of it. And it's wonderful. It seems like you're creating an army of wonderful a community that is going to give back to these special needs individuals and their families. It's wonderful, and it's been a pleasure having you with Child Foundation. We have a comment. I feel lucky to see you after a long time.
Thank you.
And it's been wonderful, and it's as I said, it's almost like a very sweet full circle that we have you so close to our Child Foundation's birthday, and it's an honor to have your support and your wonderful presence with us. Any last comments for our audience who are listening to you, and before we say our goodbyes?
Well, this may sound really a sort of silly comment, but I must say it's the smile on people's faces, the children and the parents. who see how much improvement is possible. I know it doesn't come easily, it doesn't come overnight, but it's so worth working for on behalf of that child and their families. I think people should take heart that never perhaps is it going to be that the child makes such progress that it can all be forgotten that they ever had cerebral palsy. But I think they become for everybody that special child, because if they're anything like the two children that have grown up with me here, they never complain. I never hear them say, oh, I wish I could do this, I wish I could do that, or why can't I do what other people who don't depend on a wheelchair. But they're so full of fun and laughter, and then I think it helps everybody get their perceived problems into perspective. When you see these little warriors, how wonderfully they fight these problems that they face in life. No, thank you so much.
So at Child Foundation, we have a motto, we want to inspire everyday superheroes, and part of that everyday superheroes are these children, and then the families, and then the professionals who work with them. And you are definitely to us one of those superheroes, and thank you so much for joining us, and we hope and wish you a very Merry Christmas and a New Year, and we wish you good health, and definitely biggest gratitude from all those parents, me being a parent of a special needs child, and for on behalf of all those children in Bangladesh whose children have benefited in so many ways and will continue to benefit from what you have planted in Bangladesh. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much. I'm most grateful to you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. যারা আমাদের সাথে এতক্ষণ ছিলেন, আমরা আসলে খুবই লাকি যে আমাদের মধ্যে একজন এমন বিশিষ্ট গুণী মানুষ ছিলেন, এতক্ষণ আমাদের সাথে কথা বললেন, যার কন্ট্রিবিউশন বাংলাদেশের স্পেশাল নিড কমিউনিটির জন্য আসলেও ভাষায় প্রকাশ করার মতো না। আমরা দেখতে পারলাম যে উনি নিজের দেশকে ফেলে বাংলাদেশের জন্য 51 বছর ধরে কাজ করে আসছেন। অবশ্যই আমরা লাকি যে এমন একজন মানুষের সাথে আমরা আজকে চাইল্ড ফাউন্ডেশনে তাকে সামনে পেয়েছি। এবং আপনাদের যদি সেরিব্রাল পালসি রিলেটেড কোনো প্রশ্ন থাকে, কোনো রিসোর্সের কোনো ইনফরমেশন যেটা আজকে আমরা যেটা নিয়ে কথা বলেছি, আরো কোনো প্রশ্ন থাকে, আমাদেরকে ইনবক্স করতে পারেন, আমাদেরকে কমেন্ট করতে পারেন। আশা করি আপনারা ভালো থাকবেন। আল্লাহ হাফেজ।